simple text from an old phone number. That's all it took to unravel everything. What started as confusion turned into fear, then terror, as someone with access to a discarded piece of identity used it to invade a life that was supposed to be new, separate, safe. This is the story of how our digital footprints follow us, how the things we leave behind can be weaponized by those who refuse to let go, and how warnings that seem insignificant can escalate into nightmares we never saw coming. This psychological thriller explores the vulnerability we create through our connected lives, the fine line between persistence and obsession, and what happens when someone decides your attempt to move on is a betrayal they won't accept. Subscribe to Should Have Known Stories for more mysterious tales that will make you reconsider every digital trace you leave behind. Watch the next video to discover another warning that came disguised as something ordinary until it was too late. I should have known when the messages started coming from my old number, but I didn't. I should have known when the messages started coming from my old number, but I didn't. The first text arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee, scrolling through emails before work. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen expecting something mundane, a promotional message, maybe, or a reminder about an appointment. Instead, I saw my old phone number, the one I'd changed 6 months ago after moving to a new city for a fresh start, the one I'd deliberately left behind along with everything else from my previous life. Seeing it there, glowing on my screen, sent a strange chill through me that I couldn't quite explain. The message was simple. Just 2 words, remember me? No context, no explanation, nothing that would help me understand who was texting or what they wanted. I stared at it for a long moment, my coffee growing cold in my hand, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Phone numbers get recycled, I told myself. Someone new must have been assigned my old number, and they were probably just confused, texting the wrong person. It happened all the time. I typed back a quick response explaining they had the wrong contact and went about my day, pushing the strange feeling aside. But the messages didn't stop. That night, another one came through. You can't just forget. Then another the next morning. I'm still here. Each message was short, cryptic, designed to unsettle without revealing anything concrete. I tried blocking the number, but somehow the messages kept coming through, appearing in my inbox despite the block. I tried calling it back once, but it just rang endlessly, never going to voicemail, never connecting to anything. It was like calling into a void. My rational mind tried to explain it away. A glitch in the phone system. A prank from someone who'd got my new number somehow. A coincidence that meant nothing. But late at night, when I was alone in my apartment with only the glow of my phone screen for company, doubt crept in. That number had been mine for 7 years. I'd given it to everyone who mattered, friends, family, employers, doctors. It held my entire life, my entire digital identity. And now someone else had it, someone who seemed to know I'd once owned it, someone who was deliberately trying to get my attention. The question that kept me awake wasn't who was texting me. It was what they knew, what they wanted, and how they'd found my new number in the first place. The messages became more frequent, more personal. I know where you work. Came through on Thursday afternoon while I was in a meeting. I felt my stomach drop, that cold dread spreading through my chest like ice water. I looked around the conference room, suddenly paranoid, wondering if someone was watching me, if this was more than just texts from a stranger. After the meeting, I went to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, hands shaking as I reread the message over and over. How could they know where I worked? I'd been careful when I moved. I'd kept my new life separate from my old one, hadn't posted about my job on social media, hadn't updated my LinkedIn until weeks after starting. That evening, I received a photo. My workplace. The building I walked into every day, photographed from across the street during what looked like the morning commute based on the angle of the shadows. I could even see people entering the lobby in the background, though the focus was clearly on the building itself. No message accompanied it, just the image, but the implication was clear. They weren't just texting randomly. They knew things about me. They were watching. I sat on my couch staring at that photo for hours, trying to decide what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I tell them? That someone was texting me from a recycle phone number? That they'd sent a photo of a public building? It felt both threatening and somehow not enough to warrant official intervention. I tried reaching out to my old phone carrier, explaining the situation, asking if they could tell me who had been assigned my old number. They cited privacy policies, said they couldn't release that information, suggested I file a police report if I felt threatened. I tried explaining that I just wanted to understand what was happening, but they remained firm. Company policy, privacy laws, there was nothing they could do. I felt trapped in a bureaucratic loop where the rules designed to protect people were somehow preventing me from protecting myself. The messages continued. You left something behind. Arrived with a photo of my old apartment building, the one I'd moved out of 6 months ago. Did you think you could just disappear? Came through with a picture of the coffee shop I used to frequent every morning before work. Each image was a piece of my old life, proof that whoever was texting me knew my history, my patterns, my routines from before. They were mapping my previous existence and sending it back to me like evidence in a trial I didn't know I was part of. And somehow, impossibly, they'd connected that old life to my new one. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie awake listening to every sound in my apartment building, convinced that footsteps in the hallway were someone coming for me, that shadows moving past my window were more than just passing cars. My phone stayed on my nightstand, face down, because I couldn't stand seeing the screen light up with another message. But not looking was almost worse than looking. The anticipation, the dread of what might be waiting, created its own kind of torture. By the end of the second week, I had dark circles under my eyes and a constant tension headache that wouldn't respond to any medication. I started researching online, falling down rabbit holes of forum posts about phone number recycling, identity theft, and digital stalking. I learned that when you give up a number, it enters a quarantine period before being reassigned, usually 90 days, sometimes longer depending on the carrier. After that, it becomes available again, and someone new gets assigned what used to be your unique identifier. They inherit your digital footprint, whether they want it or not. Text messages from people who don't know you've changed numbers. Calls from your dentist reminding you about appointments. Two-factor authentication codes for accounts you forgot to update. Your entire life, packaged and handed to a stranger. But this felt different. This felt targeted. The person with my old number wasn't just passively receiving misdirected messages, they were actively using their access to my former identity to invade my current one. They were piecing together who I used to be and somehow connecting it to who I was now. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had. How had they got my new number? Had they cross-referenced my old contacts? Tracked down my social media despite my privacy settings? Found some database that connected my old identity to my new one? The technical knowledge required suggested this wasn't random. This was deliberate, calculated. Someone with skills and motivation I couldn't begin to understand. I decided to document everything. I took screenshots of every message, saved every photo they sent, created a folder on my laptop with timestamps and notes about my emotional state when each one arrived. If I was going to go to the police eventually, I needed evidence. I needed to prove this was harassment, that it was escalating, that I had reason to fear. But even as I compiled my documentation, doubt nagged at me. What if they looked at this collection of texts and photos and saw nothing threatening? What if I was overreacting, letting paranoia transform something benign into something sinister? What if the police thought I was crazy? Then the messages changed tone. Do you remember what you did? Arrived on a Saturday morning. I stared at those 6 words, feeling my pulse quicken. What I did? I hadn't done anything. I just moved, started over, tried to build a better life in a new place. But the question planted seeds of doubt. Had I wronged someone before leaving? Had I left behind loose ends, broken promises, damaged relationships I'd chosen to forget about rather than address? I scrolled through my memories, trying to find something that would explain this, but came up empty. My departure had been clean, planned, normal. There was no drama, no burned bridges, no reason for someone to harbor this kind of grudge. You can't run from it came next, followed by the truth always catches up. The messages were building towards something, creating a narrative where I was guilty of some unspecified crime, and they were the agent of justice or revenge. But I didn't know what story they were telling, what role I was supposed to have played. The ambiguity was maddening. If they just said what they wanted, what they thought I'd done, I could defend myself or apologize or do whatever was needed to make this stop. Instead, they kept me in this limbo of accusation without specifics, guilt without understanding. I broke down and called my mom. I hadn't wanted to worry her, hadn't wanted to admit that my fresh start wasn't going as smoothly as I'd claimed. But I needed to talk to someone, needed an outside perspective on whether I was crazy or justified in my fear. She listened as I explained everything, the messages, the photos, the feeling of being watched. Her voice was concerned but calm, the way it had been when I was a child afraid of monsters under the bed. She suggested I file a police report, said even if they couldn't do anything immediately, at least there would be a record if things escalated. She also asked a question that had been lurking in the back of my mind, but I'd been afraid to voice. Could it be someone from before? Someone you knew? The thought had occurred to me, of course, but I dismissed it because it seemed impossible. How would someone I knew have gotten assigned my old number? What were the odds? My mom pointed out that odds didn't matter if someone was determined enough. If they'd known I was planning to change numbers, if they'd been tracking when I did it, they could have requested that specific number from the carrier. It happened, she said. People did stranger things when they wanted to maintain contact with someone who'd cut them off. The possibility opened up a new avenue of dread. This might not be a stranger who'd randomly inherited my old number. This might be someone I knew, someone I'd deliberately left behind, someone who'd found a way to follow me into my new life. I started going through my old contacts, trying to remember everyone who'd had my previous number, everyone who might have a reason to do this. Ex-partners, former friends, colleagues I'd lost touch with, even acquaintances from my old neighborhood. I created a list, pathetic and paranoid, of people who might harbor enough resentment to stalk me through recycled phone numbers. But as I wrote names down, I realized how absurd it sounded. Most of these people had moved on with their lives. Our relationships had ended naturally, without drama or lasting animosity. The idea that any of them would go to such elaborate lengths seemed like the product of sleep deprivation and anxiety rather than reality. But then I remembered Alex. We'd been close once years ago, before things got complicated. Before they'd become too attached, too invested in a friendship, I couldn't reciprocate at the intensity they wanted. I tried to create distance gently, pulling back gradually rather than ending things abruptly. But Alex had noticed, had confronted me about it, and the conversation had gone badly. Accusations that I'd led them on, that I'd never really cared, that I was abandoning them when they needed me most. I'd felt terrible about it, but I'd also felt trapped. You can't force yourself to feel what you don't feel, can't make yourself want a relationship you don't want just because the other person needs it. After that conversation, Alex had become distant but not gone. They'd still text occasionally, still react to my social media posts, still exist in the periphery of my life in a way that was uncomfortable but not quite harassment. When I'd moved and changed my number, I'd been relieved. It felt like a clean break, a chance to start over, without that lingering guilt. I hadn't told Alex I was leaving. I'd just left. And now, sitting in my apartment with my phone full of cryptic messages from my old number, I wondered if that had been a mistake. If Alex had felt abandoned enough to do something like this. I opened Instagram, searched for Alex's profile with hands that trembled slightly. Their account was still there, still active, but the recent posts were strange. Cryptic captions about betrayal and karma. Photos of old locations we used to visit together, posted recently with no context. And in the comments, responses from concerned friends asking if they were okay, if they needed someone to talk to. Alex had replied to none of them. I scrolled through months of posts, watching the progression from normal life updates to increasingly dark and cryptic content. Something had changed. Something had broken. And the timing aligned perfectly with when I'd moved away. I tried calling Alex directly from a block number, needing to know if my suspicions were correct. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. No voice, just breathing on the other end. I said Alex's name, asked if they were there, explained that I just wanted to talk. The breathing continued, steady and deliberate, proof that someone was listening even if they wouldn't respond. Then the line went dead. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a new message from my old number. You finally figure it out. My blood ran cold. It was Alex. It had been Alex all along. I immediately typed back, trying to explain, to apologize for leaving without saying goodbye, to make them understand that I just needed space and a fresh start, and it hadn't been personal. The messages poured out of me in a stream of consciousness confession, everything I'd been too cowardly to say before. I watched the delivered status under each message, waiting for the read receipts, waiting for a response that would tell me Alex had understood, had forgiven me, had decided to move on. But nothing came. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. My texts sat there unanswered, floating in digital limbo, proof that explanation wasn't what Alex wanted. The next message from my old number arrived at midnight. Meet me where it started. I knew immediately what that meant. The coffee shop where we'd first met 4 years ago, when we'd both reached for the same book on the community shelf and struck up a conversation about our favorite authors. It had been organic and easy, the kind of instant connection that felt rare and precious. For a long time, that's what our friendship had been. And then it had soured slowly as Alex's feelings shifted into something I couldn't reciprocate. The coffee shop held both our beginning and the seeds of our ending. Of course, Alex would choose it for whatever confrontation this was building toward. I shouldn't have agreed. Every instinct screamed that meeting Alex alone at their request, after weeks of escalating harassment, was dangerous. But I was exhausted from the anxiety, from the constant vigilance, from sleeping with one eye open and jumping at every notification. I wanted it over. I wanted closure, resolution, whatever would make the messages stop. So I typed back, when? The response came immediately, like Alex had been waiting, hovering over their phone, anticipating my surrender. Tomorrow. Noon. Come alone. The last 2 words sent a fresh wave of fear through me, but I agreed. I told myself it was a public place, broad daylight, plenty of witnesses if anything went wrong. I told myself Alex just wanted to talk, to be heard, to express their hurt face to face, rather than through cryptic texts. I told myself a lot of things that night. Most of them were lies I needed to believe to get through until morning. I arrived 15 minutes early and positioned myself where I could see the entrance, nursing a coffee I couldn't taste through the anxiety tightening my throat. The coffee shop looked exactly as I remembered. Same mismatched furniture, same indie music playing too quietly, same smell of espresso and baked goods. But being there felt wrong, like stepping back into a life I'd worked hard to leave behind. Other customers sat scattered around the space, absorbed in their laptops and conversations, oblivious to the tension coiling in my chest. I watched the door, my leg bouncing under the table, rehearsing what I'd say when Alex walked in. Noon came and went. 12:15. 12:30. I checked my phone obsessively, expecting a message explaining the delay or changing the location. Nothing came. By 12:45, I started to wonder if this was part of the game. Make me show up, make me wait, make me feel the same uncertainty and anxiety I'd presumably caused Alex by leaving. I considered leaving, but something kept me rooted to my chair. If I left now, the messages would just continue. This was my chance to end it, to face whatever Alex needed to say, and finally move forward. At 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Not a text from my old number, but a call from an unknown number. I answered hesitantly, pressing the phone to my ear. Alex's voice came through, distorted slightly, like they were using some kind of voice modulator or speaking through fabric. "Look at your old number's message history," they said. Then the line went dead. Confused, I opened my messages and scrolled to the conversation thread with my old number. There, sent while I'd been sitting in the coffee shop waiting, was a new photo. My apartment building, taken from inside my apartment, from my living room, looking out through my window at the street below. Panic hit me like a physical blow. Alex wasn't at the coffee shop. Alex was in my apartment, had been in my apartment while I sat here like an idiot, exactly where they told me to be. I stood so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing annoyed looks from nearby customers. My hands shook as I tried to call 911, but another message came through before I could dial. Everything you left behind is still here, including me. The photo that accompanied it showed my bedroom, my unmade bed, my clothes scattered on the floor from this morning when I'd been too anxious to care about tidiness. I ran out of the coffee shop, down the street to where I'd parked my car, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might be sick. I drove toward my apartment building with no clear plan, calling 911 as I went, trying to explain to the dispatcher that someone had broken into my home, that I'd been lured away deliberately, that I needed police there immediately. She kept asking questions. Was I certain someone was inside? Had I seen them? Was I in immediate danger? I tried to explain about the photos, about the messages, but it all sounded insane spoken aloud to a stranger. She assured me officers were being dispatched, told me not to enter the building until they arrived, to wait in a safe location. I parked across the street from my building and waited, watching the entrance with sick dread. Minutes felt like hours. Police arrived with sirens off, 2 officers who approached my car and asked for details. I showed them the messages, the photos taken from inside my apartment, explained about Alex and the recycled phone number, and the weeks of escalating contact. They listened with professional neutrality, asked for Alex's full name and any physical description I could provide, then approached the building with hands resting casually on their belts near their weapons. I waited in my car, forbidden from following, watching them disappear through the entrance into the lobby. 10 minutes passed. 15. My phone stayed silent. No new messages, no calls, nothing. The quiet felt worse than the constant harassment had. At least when Alex was texting me, I knew where their attention was focused. This silence could mean anything. That they'd fled when they saw the police. That they were still inside, hidden somewhere the officers hadn't checked yet. That this whole thing was about to escalate into something I couldn't take back. I thought about all the true crime documentaries I'd watched, all the stories that started exactly like this. Someone who couldn't let go, someone whose obsession turned dangerous, someone who decided that if they couldn't have the relationship they wanted, they'd make sure nobody could have any peace. One of the officers emerged and walked toward my car. His expression was carefully neutral in a way that made my stomach drop. He explained that they'd found my apartment door unlocked, my apartment empty. No sign of forced entry, no indication anyone was currently inside. But things had been moved. Personal items rearranged. Photos taken off my walls and placed face down on furniture. My laptop left open on my bed displaying photos of Alex and me from years ago, from when we'd been happy, before everything got complicated. Evidence that someone had definitely been there, had gone through my belongings, had violated my space in deeply personal ways. They asked if I had somewhere else I could stay while they processed the scene and attempted to locate Alex. I nodded numbly, thinking of my coworker who'd offered multiple times to help if I needed anything. The officer said they'd file a report, that breaking and entering was a serious crime, that they'd issue a warrant for Alex's arrest. But even as they spoke, I could see the calculation in their eyes. This wasn't the kind of case that got priority. No violence, no immediate threat, just property violation and psychological harassment. Alex would probably turn themselves in within a few days with a lawyer, make bail immediately, and I'd be left with a restraining order that was just paper unless Alex decided to respect it. I called my co-worker from a parking lot, explained in the vaguest terms possible that I was having a personal emergency and needed somewhere to crash. She agreed immediately, gave me her address, told me to come over whenever I needed. As I drove away from my building, leaving my violated apartment and my former life behind once again, my phone buzzed one more time. My old number. You still don't understand. This isn't about the apartment. This is about what you took from me. I spent 3 weeks at my co-worker's apartment while police investigated, and I tried to piece my life back together. Alex turned themselves in after 4 days, just as predicted, with a lawyer who argued their client had experienced a mental health crisis and needed treatment rather than prosecution. The judge set bail at an amount Alex's family could easily afford, issued a restraining order requiring them to stay 500 feet from me at all times and scheduled a hearing for 2 months out. The system moved at its usual glacial pace while I lived out of a suitcase and jumped at every unexpected sound. My therapist said I was experiencing symptoms of PTSD, hypervigilance, intrusive thoughts, difficulty sleeping, persistent anxiety. She explained that having your sense of safety violated, having someone invade your private space and demonstrate they could reach you whenever they wanted, created trauma that would take time to heal. She recommended I consider moving again, changing my number again, taking all the same steps I'd taken 6 months ago when I naively thought I could outrun my past. The idea of starting over a second time filled me with exhausted despair. How many times would I have to run? How many identities would I have to shed before I could finally feel safe? The messages stopped after Alex's arrest, but I couldn't bring myself to feel relieved. The silence felt temporary, like a storm that had moved offshore but could return at any moment. I changed all my passwords, enabled every privacy setting on every platform, deleted social media accounts I'd had for years. I became a ghost by necessity, erasing my digital footprint because I'd learned too well how that information could be weaponized by someone determined enough. Friends from my old life tried to reach out through my mom, asking if I was okay, if I needed support. I didn't respond. I couldn't explain what had happened without reliving it, and reliving it felt impossible. The court date came and went. Alex pleaded guilty to breaking and entering, received a suspended sentence contingent on completing therapy and maintaining the restraining order. They stood before the judge and apologized, said they'd been going through something dark and had handled it badly, that they never meant to scare me, and deeply regretted their actions. Their lawyer painted a picture of someone troubled but not dangerous, someone who'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. I sat in the courtroom listening to my terror being reframed as a misunderstanding, my trauma reduced to mistakes, my fear dismissed as an overreaction. The judge accepted the plea deal. Alex walked out of the courthouse free, while I went home to my co-worker's spare room, still too afraid to return to my own apartment. Eventually, I had to move back. I couldn't impose on my co-worker's hospitality forever, and my lease wasn't up for another 6 months. I changed the locks, installed a security system with cameras, informed my neighbors about the situation so they'd watch for anyone suspicious. My apartment felt contaminated, tainted by Alex's presence even after I'd deep cleaned every surface and rearranged all the furniture they'd touched. I couldn't erase the knowledge that they'd been there, breathing my air, touching my belongings, invading my most private space. I should have known when the messages started coming from my old number. But I didn't. I should have recognized it as a warning sign, should have acted immediately instead of dismissing it as coincidence or technical glitch. I should have trusted my instincts when that first text arrived, and something in my gut said this was wrong. But I second-guessed myself, rationalized away my fear, convinced myself I was being paranoid. By the time I accepted the threat was real, Alex had already invaded every aspect of my life, mapping my routines, learning my vulnerabilities, preparing for the confrontation I'd been too afraid to see coming. The restraining order is still in effect, but paper doesn't stop someone truly determined. I check my phone compulsively, still expecting to see messages from my old number, even though it's been months since Alex's arrest. I still look over my shoulder when I walk to my car, still check that my door is locked multiple times before bed, still feel my heart rate spike when I see someone who resembles Alex in a crowd. The fear has become part of my daily routine, woven into the fabric of my existence so thoroughly I don't remember what it felt like to move through the world without it. My therapist says healing isn't linear, that recovery from this kind of violation takes time and patience and self-compassion I'm still learning to give myself. She says one day I'll be able to change my phone number without fear, move to a new apartment without wondering if I'm being followed, exist online without constantly monitoring who's watching. I want to believe her. But experience has taught me that digital footprints never fully disappear, that determined people find ways around restraining orders, that the tools meant to connect us can be weaponized by those who refuse to let go. What I learned from those weeks of terror is that our modern lives leave us vulnerable in ways we don't fully comprehend. Phone numbers, addresses, work locations, daily routines, we shed this information constantly, casually, never thinking about how it could be collected and used against us. We trust that when we leave something behind, it stays behind. We assume that changing numbers means severing connections. We believe that moving cities means starting fresh. But in an age where everything is documented and nothing is truly deleted, escape is an illusion. Someone with enough motivation can always find a way back into your life. I still have my old number blocked, even though it's pointless. Even though I know the next threat might come from anywhere, any number, any platform. But blocking it gives me the illusion of control, the feeling that I've done something to protect myself even if protection is ultimately impossible. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about warnings we ignore until it's too late. Like this video if you've ever felt the creeping dread of being watched. And watch the next one, because sometimes the danger doesn't announce itself with violence. Sometimes it starts with something as simple as a text from a number that used to be yours. Sometimes by the time you realize you should have known, it's already too late to run.